What it would mean. Are you going to change the law so that people would have to be in educational training until they reach 18?
We've charged the Ministry of Education now with developing the detailed plan after consultation with stakeholders. Changing the law is certainly a possibility. Change the law would need to involve probably a break between the link between enrolment and attendance, because while we want our schools to lead this and become more relevant to a wider range of young people, we also recognise there are very, very good community-based efforts supporting young people. Auckland Chamber of Commerce has told me about one they're working on today, where they'll be working with hard to place young people in precisely this age group. So the chances are that a number of our young people will be out and work, but they'll still be formally attached in some way to a learning program.
So how does this differ from what John Key announced yesterday?
He seemed to focus on a very limited number of young people. This is focusing on what is around 29,000 young people who would be kept attached to some form of learning in the 16 and 17 year age group. And it's about drawing out their potential. Our country is short of skills. We really need more highly educated and skilled people to drive our economic and social development. So I've put the focus very squarely on opportunity.
You've put leadership on the agenda there too, Prime Minister, where you talk about hidden agendas, and you don't name John Key, you don't name the National Party, but it's quite clear you're talking about them. Are you saying he can't be trusted?
We don't know what they stand for. That's the only thing that's clear about where National is positioned today. They're not disclosing the extent of their full agenda. It can be inferred from the odd policy slip, like letting doctors charge what they like, significant change to employment law which would tilt the balance against ordinary working people, sale of the state-owned enterprises. Once these policies prove unpopular out there, the cork goes back in the bottle and we hear very little. So this year is going to be about flushing out where they really do stand, because at the moment there's a large veil across it.
Unlike John Key yesterday, who mentioned you a lot in his speech, you didn't mention him once. Is this part of a strategy to ignore your enemy?
I'm taking a very positive view of the year ahead, taking a very positive view of the potential of New Zealand. I've got things I want to say about where our country is going and can go when we step up the next notch in areas like realising the full potential of our young people. So this is not a time for focusing on the negatives or on deficits. It's about talking opportunity.
Can I just clarify in terms of the policy? I mean, would it mean that, say, a 17-year-old couldn't go leave and work in a car yard?
No, it doesn't mean that, but it does mean they would need to continue to be attached to the education system in some way. It's about our schools leading on making education more relevant and also working with community partners and employers to achieve that. There's a lot of goodwill out there in the community and among employers to helping young people reach their full potential. And I believe with schools and other sectors working closely together, we can achieve these goals.
So they would have to be
young salesmen still be attached to the education system? I mean, how do you see it attached?
We now have the capacity through the enrolled system to keep track of young people, where they're enrolled, and what we'll be looking for is to see that young people are still attached to the system, even if, in a number of cases, they are out at work. The important thing is not to go from school at 16 to do nothing. It's to carry on learning.
It's got to change though, isn't it? Like if you look back, and I know times are very, very different, but a Bob Jones or a self-made man or woman who leaves school and wants to work in a bar or a car sales yard or whatever. I mean, why should they be attached to an education state program?
Times are different because half our workforce doesn't have the education skills to function fully in the knowledge economy that we need to be. So if we want to be growing New Zealand's prosperity, raising our living standards across the board, we have to support our people to have more education and skills. So it's very much about realising the potential of New Zealand.
So if someone wants to leave school at 17 and just has got nothing to go to, they're just dropping out, what happens?
that would be a possibility, because we need to keep people in the system. We need to track that. They may not necessarily be in school, but they will be attached in some way.
But would they be treated as a truant or?
Well, they're truants now if they're not in the system at the age of 16, but those years between 16 and 18 are years where a lot of learning still needs to be done, and as we roll out detailed implementation plan, working with our schools, I think you'll see us able to build on the many creative things schools are doing now to keep the attention of young people.
If they weren't attached to the system, would they not get the dole then?
Well, under 18s don't get the dole now.
Prime Minister, this issue of youth crime has been very much in the news. You said that today's violent criminals were the spawn, if you like, of the 1991 Motherhood budget. Do you take no responsibility for the last 8 or 9 years in terms of things that your government could have done?
Back in 1991, when National came into government, delivered the Mother of all budgets, cut benefits, wrecked employment law, unemployment rose to over 10%, steakhouse rentals went through the roof. A lot of people fell through the cracks, and at that time all the social commentators said we'll pay a heavy price for these years, and we have paid a heavy price for these years. The important thing for me is to keep building the policies which make a difference to that. That's why youth justice is something we take very seriously, and we've done a lot. There wasn't a lot new in what was announced yesterday at all. And going forward on the areas I've talked about today, with picking up the problems early and dealing with that group of young people that is drifting out at 16 or earlier, we can make a big difference.
So under your plan, do you think schools are going to be quite different institutions in 5 or 10 years' time than they are now with the youth apprenticeships?
I think in what we've announced today, there's the potential for our schools to really be liberated, to be very, very creative in how they engage students' attention. And we've seen some fantastic things happening around schools. We now need to work from the best practice of that to roll it out right across the country, so that all our schools are involved with those ways of keeping the less academic in the system.
Has that 1991 budget of Ruth Richardson's, has that seen the lost generation that has been so often talked about?
I believe there has been a lost generation from 1991. I think if you go back even earlier to post-oil shock New Zealand, when unemployment began to climb and climb steadily, and then with the Mother-all budgets took off into double figures, we've seen a lot of shattered families, broken communities, and that has an impact on people. It is never an excuse for violent crime, but violent crime occurs against a context. Now, we've done a tremendous amount to break that 3-generation unemployment. We've done a tremendous amount to get people who've never seen work in their family in years back to work and earning their way. That's why we've got very low unemployment. We've now got to take the next steps.
Prime Minister, is it just coincidence that you and John Key chose pretty similar areas? There was a bit of a hint in the Dominion Post, I think, this morning that Labour was worried about having some mole in its.
No, I don't. I think that we've approached these issues from totally different perspectives. His perspective has been very much a deficit one, scratching away at an area which governments have to address and people should take seriously. But I'm looking at it from the point of view of how do we build potential? How do we build New Zealand? How do we put in place the building blocks which make a big difference? How do we give young people opportunity and a chance? And really the two are chalk and cheese. They can't be compared.
Did you tweak your speech after he delivered his yesterday?
My speech was very, very substantially written by me. It was largely completed over the weekend. The work I did in it yesterday afternoon was simply expanding based on the Cabinet decision and discussions earlier in the day about the finalisation of the policy.
Prime Minister, do you harbour any apprehensions in your battle for a historic photo?
And the opportunity.